Hello. Thank you for having me. Um, yeah, my name is Josh, and I'm an alcoholic. Um, my sobriety date is 9/19/19. Um, a couple weeks out from 5 years, very close. Gonna keep it going till then. We're hoping. um, I have a sponsor. I'm not currently sponsoring anyone, but I consistently work a program and have a home group that I go to every week, as well as a number of meetings that I go to throughout the week as well, to keep things, keep recovery at the forefront of my mind. I participate in HACYPAA. I plan to participate in other YPAA events coming up here. Minnesota has a lot going on in the next year, which is super exciting. But the focus is on HACYPAA right now, so we're excited to have that coming around here next April. In terms of my experience, strength, and hope, I suppose I can start with some of the details about my childhood. The growing up, I experienced my household was tricky at times. I didn't experience anything in the form of physical or sexual abuse, but I had a lot of difficulties with some emotional and verbal abuse. My dad does not identify as an alcoholic, but I do not have a memory to this point in time, up to this very day, where he has not been drinking when I've been with him or around him. There are some additional parts to my story that, contribute to the work that I do. I struggle with codependency. I struggle with anxiety and depression. But all of these things that I've experienced in my life are not things that make me an alcoholic. They are all things that I've used as excuses to drink. But I am an alcoholic because when I start drinking, I cannot stop drinking. And I'm completely powerless over alcohol, and my life becomes unmanageable if I ever start drinking. So throughout my childhood, I was actually very against any sort of like drugs or alcohol. I didn't do any like early drinking or early using or anything like that. It wasn't until I was like almost complete with my senior year of high school when I was 18 that I like had my first real kind of like drink. I have an older sister who's a couple years older than me, and she, was in college, and I was on my way to start college. And so it was this sort of process where, the normal thing is that we're going to go off to school, and college is going to be this place where everybody just parties. Like, it's very normal. I can get like acquainted with that sort of like way of life, and do it in a semi-safe way, or sort of the idea was. And early on through that whole period, that summer between starting college, finishing high school and starting college, and into almost completing my first semester, I was a totally normal drinker. I drank responsibly. I didn't black out. I didn't get sick. I didn't get too drunk. And it was very like, as I would have expected, what it's like for a lot of people who don't have issues with alcohol. But then I had a catalyst happen in my life related to things with codependency. I have come to learn that drove me to take that next step, to surpass the fear of what was keeping me from maybe like using as aggressively. And it gave me a reason. These different things in my life gave me a reason to say, well, if something bad's happening, I can drink over it. If something good's happening, I can drink to celebrate. If this or that or this or that, there became excuses for every moment to involve alcohol. And that catalyst, that situation for me, I'm very grateful for today because um, I am able to, as young as I am, be in a place of sobriety. Um, and that's such a gift. Even the difficulties that I had to go through to get here, I'm so grateful that they happened as early as they did. Um, and so I want to share, a bit more about some of the key points in my experience that got me to sobriety. But I'll try and skip over a lot of the, um, uh, you know, experiences while drinking that are less relevant. Um, so one of the things that I experienced early on in my use was when I started to drink, I was drinking more than everybody else. I was drinking different than everybody else. And I was pushing other people to try and drink to my level or at my frequency so that I didn't feel out of place. I was drinking to fit in, but I was sort of also not fitting in because I was the one drinking too much at the same time. So it's sort of this like weird loop almost of like making things worse. And over the years, I would continuously sort of shed different friends. I would sort of relationships would fall away. Things would become more strained with my family. I was still keeping together the things that I thought made, you know, my life normal. I said, yeah, I drink a lot, but I have a job, or I'm graduating school. These things that I'm able to do mean that I don't have a problem. Um, and I remember specifically, I had a really near miss when I was before I even finished college to getting into sobriety, but was not ready at that time. Um, I went to the doctor, and they always ask like how much you drink, how like if you smoke, all that kind of stuff, right? And at that time, I thought to myself like, okay, I'll put down like 7 drinks a day. Like that seems pretty chill. Like nobody's gonna say anything. And then my doctor was like, hey, so this is a little weird. Like maybe this is not a healthy habit. And I was like, oh, it isn't? I'm in college. I think we're good. This is very normal, right? And he's like, do you know like why you drink this much? And I was like, because I like it. I think it's fun. There's nothing wrong with that. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of a problem. Yeah. Maybe you should be assessed. I blew it off and didn't get assessed, but turns out I am very alcoholic. Just need a little more time before we got there. Um, and so that was sort of a running thing with my doctor. But once I completed school, I actually got a job in another state. And um, when we talk about different things, I've heard like different people talk about the different times in which they tried to address their drinking and it didn't work. And so this was definitely one of them for me. Um, Getting a job in another state, the idea was at this point, I was drinking enough that I knew it was like, hey, we're graduating college now. If this really is something that's just for college, then when I move to this new state and I start this new fresh start, all my drinking will be normal again, and I'll be able to do that. That's not what happened. In fact, things got worse, as they do, and I got to a point um, in in California is where I moved, where I had a situation where I nearly died. I had internal bleeding and was throwing up blood and had to go to the hospital. And I was in this position where I was alone in another state. I was drunk all the time, so my phone was dead. I was like trying to calm my family and explain, like trying to like communicate that there's a situation that's going on, like I might die, all these things. And it was extremely scary. It was one of the most difficult moments in my life. And as I was going through that, I was both trying to heal from the internal bleed, but also medically detoxing and all that stuff. Because I had been drinking 24/7, wake up, drink, you know, go through the entire day, drink, etc. Um, And when at the end of that stay, the doctor said to me that I had to wait at least 6 weeks before I could do any sort of like drinking again, or like any sort of trying not to like throw up or whatever, because the internal bleeding was like in my esophagus or whatever. But um, and in my brain, after everything I had just gone through, after how scary and difficult that situation was, it was almost immediately forgot. And my thought was, cool, so we're counting down the 6 weeks to start drinking again. And that's what happened. I was able to stay sober for those 6 weeks because it was life or death. But the second that I was like out of the woods medically, I was right back to drinking. Um, and it was shortly after that period that it started to all really dawn on me that like I really didn't have any control. I could not stop. I could not moderate. I could not do any of these things. And I took a bunch of different steps to try and get to that point where I would be a normal drinker. Um, and nothing was working. I started seeing a therapist. My therapist recommended AA, and I was like, I have a drinking problem. I'm not an alcoholic. Those are two different things. So I didn't do that right away. Um, and I still tried to work at it. I got like a month of sobriety and then relapsed at my roommate's birthday because I was like, hey, I can probably control it now, right? I made it a month in not drinking, so if I drink now, everything will be normal. Yeah, no, right back to where we were. Continued to get worse. And then I got to the point where I was given the gift of desperation. I wanted so badly to be sober. Um, and I started going to AA meetings. And one of the first days I went to this meeting, it happened every day in the middle of the day at lunchtime. And it's just a bunch of like corporate people from around the area I was working. And this guy came up to me and was like, hey, do you have a sponsor? And I was like, what's that? And he's like, you do now. And I was like, okay. Um, and so he was, working through things with me, and we started talking and started working together. But as much as I wanted it, I was still stuck in the loop of not being able to quit. And so I was drinking before I'd go to the meeting and after I get out of the meeting in my car. And I, I tried to work through it. I tried to stop it, tried to whatever. And I realized that for me, I needed to go to rehab. I needed to do an inpatient treatment. I needed to detox and get out of the world for a bit and focus on putting the building blocks in place. I knew that the second I got out of treatment, I was in the right place because I had a consistent meeting that I could go to in AA. I had a sponsor that was willing to work with me, and I was willing to work with him. And I felt so strongly that I would be able to do this if I could get over this hump of getting through the initial separation from alcohol. And that's what I did. I did inpatient treatment. I got sober and I started doing the work. And I saw the benefits pretty much immediately. I mean, I was starting to get healthy again physically. I was starting to feel better about myself, about my work, feeling confident in my ability to sort of make a difference and continuing to do those things. Um, and after about 6 to 9 months, I had worked the steps with my sponsor, and I was coming up on about a year, and I decided to move back to Minnesota. Um, I In that point in time, it was like the heart of COVID. Everything was locked down. All meetings were online, and I was moving back to this place where I hadn't done anything AA related before. And this is like a big part of my story for me because it's such an important piece of like um, this program requires constant work, and it starts out I think being very difficult, but in time there is sort of habits that form that help ease the consistent process of building the program into your way of life in a way that makes it um, just natural almost. Um, but when I first finished working those steps, or finished working the steps the first time, I felt like, hey, I can do this on my own now. I'm going to move back to Minnesota. I'm going to be on my own. I don't know anybody. I don't really like the idea of the online meetings. We're all in lockdown, yada, yada, yada. And I spent the next nearly like 3.5, 4 years almost, not doing anything in AA. And this base that I had built, this foundation of sobriety, that is just the starting point. Once I got sober, I could start working on the things that caused me to drink. Until I got sober, none of that stuff was going to be able to be worked on. And for me, that specifically includes things like codependency, anxiety, depression, things like that, personal relationships with family members, etc. And as I started to work on certain pieces of those, there were parts that got better, but there are also things that slowly started to chip away. My foundation started to crack and it started to break as I sat in my isolation. I was able to stay sober during that period, but I was not happy. I was not joyous. I didn't feel free. And um, I was becoming increasingly and consistently irritable and discontent in that time, until what I can only describe as an experience from my higher power came to take me out of that and bring me back into the recovery that I'm supposed to be doing. And so I was on my own. I was slowly making my way back out, whether I realized it or not. And an opportunity came up where there was a friend who basically reached out and was like, hey, I'm sober, but I haven't gone to AA and I don't know anything about it. There is this meeting, and something in my head clicked where I was like, do you want to go to this together? Do you want me to take you to this? I've done this before. Like, we can go together and I can be like your support. And in my head, I was like, yeah, I'm helping her out. But in retrospect, that situation was helping me just as much. That situation brought me back into the rooms, and specifically brought me into a place of recovery that I was lacking in that first year of AA for me. I had worked heavily on the recovery and service part of it, but I really didn't have much community when I was out in California. And when I came back into recovery, or specifically AA, in the last few months, I connected with people. I got connected with HACYPAA and all the young people, and actually building out a sober friendship group, or like connecting with people in sobriety who were within a general age range of me, being able to find activities and have fun. And the experience that I've had, one, starting to work the steps again for a second time, two, um, starting to take up service positions, whether it be at meetings or doing HACYPAA stuff like HACYPAA, or just like doing fellowship stuff with other young people, has made all the difference. This year of sobriety has been both my best and worst year. And I'm so grateful for all the things that have happened, including the negative things, because life is an ebb and a flow. And for us to appreciate the really great stuff, we need to be able to get through the really difficult things, and learn from our mistakes and grow. And recovery allows us to do that. If I was using, there would be no high points. There would only be low points. And now that I'm sober, I get to have both. And for me, that is one of the main gifts of working my program, is the ability to actually experience the highs, ironically. So the biggest thing that I can sort of, I don't know, maybe try and portray is that it's become really apparent to me recently, more so than it has been in the past, that sobriety is my foundation that I build on top of. The relationships I have are me building a house on top of this foundation. If that foundation isn't strong, then the house is going to fall apart. The relationships are going to fall apart. Any of my successes are going to fall apart. And so I continue to work on that foundation. I continue to refine it, support it, build upon it. And then I build on top of that the things that I want to make in my life that help me to be happy, joyous, and free. And this program allows me to do that. So with that, I will pass.